You're locked in to the hottest station on the planet.
Resistance is futile. The revolution has begun.
You're listening to Rebelpreneur Radio, helping you break the rules and build the business you need for the life you want. And now, broadcasting his pirate signal
from somewhere beyond the status quo,
here's your host, best-selling author, marketing and media strategist, Ralph Brogden.
Hello and welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio. It's the show that helps you build the business you need so you can live the life you want. I'm Ralph Brogden. Well, tell me about your ideal life, your ideal business. Everyone has a different vision, a different purpose, a different dream in mind. What are you doing to make that dream a reality? How are you designing your life around achieving your dreams? I believe a business gives you the best opportunity for doing that. And today's expert is going to discuss how to live your life designed around achieving your dreams and setting up a system on your team so you can help others strive to achieve their dreams as well. I'm speaking with Dane Espegard. He is a culture consultant who teaches, assists, and executes the implementation of a culture centered around dream achieving. Dane works with companies in a very simple manner to get the culture started, and he leaves them with some very easy to implement steps. Dane, welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio.
Hello, happy to be here.
You have recently written a book, and it's coming out very soon. Tell us a little bit about your work helping people to live a life designed around achieving their dreams. It sounds wonderful. How do you make that happen? Who do you work with?
Yeah, so I've spent my career with a direct sales company, Vector Marketing, learning how to sell Cutco products. That was my first job right out of high school. That's where I got introduced to sales and entrepreneurship, and had a successful 4 years of college selling the product and learning about sales and marketing, and then got into their entrepreneurship program where I opened my own district office with their company. And in that role, I was recruiting heavily and building teams and developing individuals within those teams. And our conference or our company is really focused a lot on personal growth. And so they brought in an outside speaker named Matthew Kelly. I'm not sure if you're familiar with any of his work, but he introduced the dreams concept to our entire company. This was back in 2007.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Cutco. I've actually interviewed some executives and salespeople from that organization, and it's a very powerful organization, very successful. And so that's a really that organization is well known to me.
That's awesome. I think I saw Rachel Richards, I think also.
Yeah.
You had met with. Yeah.
At least two or three that we've had on the show have been either currently or formerly working, and not just working for or working in, but really achieving personal success and financial success as well.
Yeah, Cutco has a great culture of personal and professional development, and kind of by nature of the business, they also work with a ton of college students. And so for me, I was like many others that Cutco was my introduction to the idea and practice of personal and professional growth. So that's what attracted me as a student.
Now, when you say culture, at first, that sounds like one of those 80s management buzzwords, where the consultant comes in, and we had one, at least one, probably more than one, who came in and talked about culture. What does that mean to you, and how do you think about that and apply that in the area of achieving your dreams?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. To me, culture is the way that things operate around here at all times. And so, I think the finding out the culture of an organization isn't necessarily hearing about it from the executive or reading it in the company newsletter, but it's talking to the individuals that are working day to day, shoulder to shoulder. And, it's how are they interacting with each other? What are the unspoken guidelines of, the way that we do things around here?
So it's more of an actual what people feel and experience at work as opposed to what you would like them to feel and experience. Is that right?
Yeah. And, where the sweet spot is when those two things line up. Right. And that's kind of what the dreams culture that I work with people on, that's where that hopefully hits home for a lot of people. I had the opportunity to open my own office, kind of starting a business from scratch right out of college in 2006. And I moved to a new territory. So I was building from scratch again in 2009. And I, learned a lot from those two experiences from the first one to do a little better the second time. And then moving a third time, starting from scratch, I got really clear on what did I want my culture to be, because I saw some things in the past that were positive and negative with the cultures that we had developed kind of organically. And so this time, my third time around, I was much more intentional with centering it around dreams.
Interesting that I think as we get older and the more that we do this, we tend to look at the intangibles more. In the beginning, it's the tangible things of how do I make money? How do I go out and make a sale and bring in customers? But as we begin to create a business, or maybe more than one business, we start thinking more about the intangible of what do I want to get out of this? How do I want to feel? How do I want people working here to feel and interact with one another? And it goes from something that is just kind of profit driven to more people centered. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, 100%. And, it's kind of like upgrading your problems, right? So in other words, at first I'm just the new business owner, just trying to make enough money to keep the lights on. And I'll worry about the culture maybe later.
Yeah.
And then as your business grows and you have a little bit more time or maybe a different vantage point of, hey, how would I like this to impact my people's lives a little differently?
That's interesting. And I've heard people think of people in the organization as liabilities instead of assets. And they say if you have 100 employees, you have 100 problems. And for that reason, I think we limit our own growth, and we certainly limit the success of our business because we go into it without considering the human factor, and that really makes all the difference in the success. The culture is really what is fueling the success of the business. And if you're not paying attention to people, then you're ignoring one of the key drivers.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. And I think also, what I learned through my years of doing this is that the stronger the culture is, the less, micromanagement or just management in general that's needed, because that culture is the kind of set of standards that people operate by.
Is there a single culture that is appropriate or I guess like a best practice, something that we should all strive for? Are there certain universal principles that make up a successful culture, or is it very unique to the DNA of the leadership and the organization and the people?
I think it's the second. I think it's got to be unique to the leadership in the organization. One of the things I think that is important, or at least to me, that I found success with is, just leading by example, but also living life out loud. So for me, the dreams culture fits perfectly because that's the way that I want to live. And it allows me to not try and have this separation of work life, home life, because, at this point, this day and age, that's kind of difficult to have a clear separation. And it's a lot easier when, business is going great and I'm feeling fulfilled and engaged, for me then to also show up at home the exact same way, or vice versa. And so I think with the answer to your question, I think it's got to be specific. So I don't think that there's a one size fits all when it comes to the type of culture somebody should have.
Yeah. So speaking of the work-life balance, which really is not a balance, and those lines are as blurry as ever now that the pandemic has really affected how we live and how we work. How has the pandemic affected your particular business and the way that you interact and I guess the problems that you're trying to solve now? Maybe they're a little bit different in terms of trying to iron those things out and create a culture when workers are spread all over the place. They could be at the home office, they could be at home, they could be back and forth. How do you build a culture in the middle of all of these global problems and crises?
Yeah, wow, there's a lot to unpack in that. I think that in terms of the pandemic, what it did is for our organization, we had a whole different set of challenges of, everything we did was in person. And so just like a lot of organizations, we had to pivot very quickly to how do we do all of these things that previously we thought had to be in person, and how do we do these online? And that was a stressful, for a lot of people, very stressful couple of months as we were figuring out those changes. Our organization had our best year ever in 2020, and there's a lot of changes that we were forced to make due to the pandemic that we will, were very positive changes for our organization. The culture piece, that's what allowed us to not lose anybody during it. And when I think about what culture can do when it's working at its best is really two things. It increases retention, but it also increases, which I think is more important, is the engagement of the person while they are working. And we've had this culture in our organization centered around dreams for the last 8 or 9 years. And what got me to put this all into a book was actually watching my team, not myself, but the team, and how they responded during the pandemic. And what it showed me was the real power of having a culture that was centered around dreams, because during a time where everybody was solo and they were at home and they didn't have the same, human interaction that they were having before, our people had these large lists of things that they wanted to accomplish personally, like in their lives. And they had this, we all had more alone time or home time or whatever you want to call it, isolation. And my people used that, and this wasn't a directive of me. This was part of the culture that I didn't know would happen, but they had these lists created of 100, 200, 300, 400 things that they want to do throughout their lives. And that gave them the time to be able to focus on that. So whereas a lot of people during the pandemic were kind of sitting with their hands up, like, I'm not quite sure what to do right now, the people that were focused on these dreams lists were really attacking these things and had a really exciting 2020 despite what was going on, in society.
So the difference then in the organization in being able to weather adversity, whether it's external or whether it's internal, the culture makes the difference. So a positive culture like what you're talking about enables the organization to thrive. And I think what you're saying is, if it were not for that culture, that organization would probably not thrive. It would probably fall apart, just looking at how some other organizations did not fare so well.
Mm-hmm. And one of the core tenets that's in our dreams culture is, anything is possible. And really that comes from the personal. Hey, you should pursue travel. You should pursue your best version of you, health-wise and financial. And so it operates from this place of you can really create anything that you want personally, and work is just kind of a vehicle to help you get there. But what I found through that is that, big thinkers are far more set up to be able to solve big problems. And the dreams culture by its nature of, hey, what do you want to do in your life? Think big. It doesn't have to be this year. Maybe you can't see how it's going to happen, but, let's at least put it on paper. That idea of starting down that process also gets people thinking, hey, in this organization, we focus on trying to solve big problems, good problems, right? When it's fun and what are your dreams, but also tough problems, like how do we shift our entire business model due to a pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very important. And now this is quite a different experience from the corporate culture that a lot of us experienced some years ago. And I don't know if it's necessarily the pandemic that has changed this as much as it is just a different generation of workers. Whereas in times past, you had the corporate culture, which is leave your personal life at home. When you're here, you're here to work. And we are bottom line focused. Do whatever it takes. 60 hours a week will get you promoted. That really, that whole mindset, culture, paradigm, however you wish to describe it, it's really 20th century. Yeah, I mean, it's yesterday's news compared to where we are today, isn't it?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think part of it, I think it's both. I think part of it was just shifting times. Part of it is, the generation that's entering the workforce. And then I think the pandemic, I don't think that it changed it. I think it just really expedited it. And
exacerbated some of those very characteristics that were not being addressed, and this kind of brought it to the forefront, and people with vision were able to take advantage of that and grow and improve, and the ones who were slow to recognize it did not, and so there you are. Yeah, I think that's what's been happening. I think it's going to happen more too as the college experience of the workforce, right? Like the next workforce, their college experience is totally different than any previous college students, right? They're learning to really thrive. They have to in this back and forth, and maybe I'm in class, maybe I'm at home, this distance learning. And so I think, we're just going to see more of what this trend is. So when you're working with organizations to help them create a culture like what we're talking about, what's the biggest challenge? What is the biggest problem you see that's hindering people from being able to get there?
I think it's the view of what a culture or system, the amount of time it's going to take to overhaul it. When somebody thinks of, a whole new culture, like that's got to be this really time intensive, big project. And so that's the feel that I've experienced with working with companies of, what it's going to take. And in reality, it's actually much more simple than what people may think.
Well, that's exciting, but it triggers a question. How do people find you? How do companies, do they say, wow, we've got a culture problem, let's get in touch with Dane? Or do you have to do a little bit more soul searching with them to get them to really open themselves up to the possibility that they've got a problem? It's kind of a tricky thing, kind of a tricky balance there, isn't it?
It is. And so with this, it's sometimes it's wow, we're in dire need of a big shift and we've heard about this program or this thing, let's seek it out. And other times it's just through a conversation where a company might be like, hey, our culture is fine, right? And that's almost a problem too, where it's not great, it's not bad, it's fine. And I'd describe that maybe as stale. And once in a while, somebody with that culture will hear this and say, hey, that sounds like something that could be a really nice, thing to invigorate our team and to get them really dialed in for whatever our next, year or 2 years is going to be.
The name of the book is The Dream Machine, a leader's guide to creating teams of high performers who achieve extraordinary outcomes. And I'm sure you've got all kinds of wisdom packed into that book. But someone listening right now who doesn't have access to it yet, they're thinking about going out and buying it, but they need help today. What is something you could suggest, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 things they could begin to implement right now to at least start moving them in the right direction of this culture designed around achieving dreams, not just the business goals, but the personal goals of the people as well?
That's a great question. I think for this concept, this culture works when the leadership decides to adopt it for themselves. And so the companies that have the greatest success with this are the leaders that say, hey, this is something that I'm going to do personally. And it's a fun thing. It's deciding what are the things that I want to do in my life. It's been described as a bucket list, right? I'm sure everybody's heard that term, or we call it your dreams list. And we go through a dream-storming process to help somebody put pen to paper and start through that process of just what if, right? And I think that's where a leader needs to start, is going through that. The other thing is just taking an inventory of where are we at right now with our organization, and our individuals, our core players, do they seem like, and engaging those people, and do they seem like they are thriving right now with our organization? Because a lot of people don't want to engage their core people sometimes because it's fear of, if I start asking those questions, am I going to encourage them to leave? Because now I'm asking, I don't think working here is their dream. And so there can be this fear that holds a business owner back from implementing this because of that. And what I found is I would much rather have somebody engaged and alive for 2 years than asleep at the wheel for 3 or 4.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I can imagine that one of the biggest challenges would be stepping into an environment of low trust. What are some things that people can do, whether it's personally, whether it's in their business and their relationships at home? What can we do to start building trust with one another?
I think there's a lot of different things that somebody could do. What I think works that's in line with this is trying to really hear what the other person wants, what they're excited about, and what fulfills them, right? It's actually taking a genuine interest in that person. And that's, you talk about the old style of management versus what's new in today. And the old, you're just a member of the team, a cog in the wheel. You're here to do your job. Well, people want to be a part of something, but they really want to be cared for and cared about and appreciated. And when people sit down with somebody on their team or a relationship and just say, hey, what are the things that you'd be excited about experiencing over the next year to 10 years to 15 years? I think that's the first step, because if I'm talking to somebody at work about their personal life and all the things that they want to do, and I don't bring up work at all, that's building trust, because I'm showing that, hey, I'm not asking you these questions to then manipulate the situation. I'm just curious as to what lights you up.
Very, very interesting. And I see where this would be a very powerful catalyst for change in organizations, businesses. And those of you listening, even if you aren't interested right now in building a team or scaling your business, maybe you're just a solopreneur or you just have a small group of people. As Dane was saying, it begins with the leadership. It begins with you and with your mindset and what you bring to the table. Because at some point, if you do want to build a team, if you do want to scale, and that might not be in the cards for you right now, but what are your goals for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years into the future? Are you going to do everything yourself? I don't think so. You're going to want to build a team, scale your business, have this culture that is based on everyone achieving what they want to achieve. And as Dane said, the business then becomes a vehicle for doing that. It doesn't become your reason for being. It's just a means through which you can do exactly what we say here on the show. Build the business you need so you can live the life you want. I think that fits in really well with what Dane is talking about. This is really exciting. When is and where can we get a hold of your book, The Dream Machine?
Yeah, so the website, my website is daneespegard.com. There's a bunch of stuff on there, also with some of the consulting and whatnot. You can find the book on there. You can also find it at thedreammachine.com, thedreammachinebook.com. And one of the things to kind of talk back to the what can somebody do to start now before they were with promotion of the book, anybody who purchases a copy of the book will get access to a master list of dreams that they can use. It'll be over 1,000 dreams that they can kind of select from as examples to help with their brainstorming process. And then there's another promotion that's on the website. I'm going to run a free webinar on October 16th. That's just it's one part that we do with businesses, but I'm doing it for individuals. And it's just a free dreamstorming workshop. And so it'll be on Saturday the 16th, and individuals can get a free ticket with some purchases of the book, and then they can help facilitate their creation of their own dreams list as well.
Perfect. I think that is just such a wonderful thing, because clarity is the first step. And you ask people, well, what do you want out of your life? What do you want out of your business? And they don't know, except to be very vague. They want to make more money. They want more freedom. They want more time. But having a list of prompts of here's 1,000 dreams, take your pick. Let's get creative, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Mm-hmm. And something in there is going to trigger you and really excite you, so that it draws something from within that you didn't realize was there. I think that would be one of the most powerful resources that you could take advantage of. So I encourage you to go check this out. It's DaneEspegard.com. We'll have that link on the Rebelpreneur website, as well as thedreammachinebook.com, where you can sign up to get notified when the pre-order of the book is available. Again, I've been speaking with Dane Espegard. He is the author of The Dream Machine, a leader's guide to creating teams of high performers who achieve extraordinary outcomes. This has been a really interesting conversation. I look forward to reading your book. Any final thoughts or words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Thanks for having me as well, Ralph. Conversation's been great. I'd love to leave the audience with a quote, and I heard this first from Matthew Kelly when he spoke to our company, and it's really what's inspired this entire system and culture that we do, which is, when there's hope in the future, there's power in the present. And that's really what this entire process is all about.
I love that. What a great pithy quote. That's perfect. Dane Espegard is a culture consultant who teaches, assists, and executes the implementation of a culture that is centered around dream achieving. He works with companies in a very simple manner to get the culture started, and he leaves them with some very easy to implement steps. He is the author of The Dream Machine, a leader's guide to creating teams of high performers who achieve extraordinary outcomes. You can connect with Dane at DaneEspegard.com. You go check out the book at thedreammachinebook.com. Dane, thank you so much for being on Rebelpreneur Radio today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Rebelpreneur Radio with Ralph Brogden. Download the show notes and much more at rebelpreneur.com.